In a chilling turn of events, an emergency call shattered the calm of Goodlettsville, Tennessee. A 12-year-old girl had been found dead in her own home, sending ripples of shock throughout the entire community. Just hours after leaving, her family returned to face a nightmare they could never have imagined. The murder of Yanna Ortega was a brutal case, one that would haunt investigators. It took place in what should have been a sanctuary for a child, her home. When the authorities discovered Yanna, they found her with a martial arts belt cruelly wrapped around her neck, not once, but twice. The belt was secured with a double knot at the back, a terrifying detail that would forever mark the scene. She was found in her own room. Her lifeless body bore the signs of a struggle, and she was not fully dressed. The horror of the scene was unbearable. No one could fathom that such violence had occurred in their midst, especially while her family had only stepped out for a brief moment. Before the tragedy unfolded, Yanna had sent a message to her mother. Initially, the message seemed typical, a normal interaction between mother and daughter. But when police learned of it, they recognized its potential significance. Whoever had committed this heinous act had taken their time. After the attack, Yanna's earbuds were recovered, drenched in evidence of a struggle. These earbuds, which had been in her ears during the assault, told a silent story of her last moments. The attacker had approached her without warning. That message was the missing link in the investigation, providing authorities with a crucial clue they desperately needed to piece together the tragic puzzle. Thanks to that single piece of evidence, the police were able to identify the perpetrator. This case rocked the community, particularly because it transpired in a place where Yanna should have felt completely secure. The events unfolded in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, a small town of approximately 17,000 residents. Typically, Goodlettsville exuded a peaceful and easygoing vibe, a place where families could thrive. Yet, for one young girl, this town failed to provide a safe haven. Her name was Yanna Ortega. Born in 2005 to Patricia Velasquez and Marlon Ortega, her early years were marred by the storm of her parents' separation. When Yanna was still very young, Patricia and Marlon parted ways. From that moment, life took a different turn. Following the split, Patricia moved her 3 children to a trailer park, where Yanna grew up alongside her younger brother, Oscar, and her older sister, Jocelyn, who was 2 years her senior. While their life was far from perfect, Patricia poured her heart into raising her children. Once an architect in Mexico, her dreams shifted dramatically upon becoming a single mother in the United States. Her focus became her children. She dedicated herself fully to being the best mother possible. Yanna was not just an ordinary girl. She had a keen interest in technology and a passion for karate. Her mother beamed with pride at her daughter's achievements. Tragically, it was one of Yanna's karate belts that was used in the horrific act that ended her life. With her talents and aspirations, it seemed Yanna was destined to achieve great things. But fate had a cruel twist in store. Patricia believed in her daughter's potential, yet on that fateful day, August 10, 2022, Yanna remained at home alone. Earlier that day, she had sustained an injury while skating, resulting in a fractured ankle. Stuck on crutches, she opted to stay behind while her family ventured out. Content to relax, Yanna chose to watch a movie in her room, settling into what seemed like a regular day, mundane, unremarkable. But as her family left, a sinister fate lurked just beyond the threshold. What should have been a peaceful afternoon of rest transformed into an unspeakable horror. That evening, at approximately 6:45 p.m., the tranquility was shattered by a 911 call, one that would forever change the course of many lives. The call was fraught with panic. "I can't understand." "Okay, this is somebody pick a plan, somebody pick a plan." "Hold on, stay on the line with me, okay? We're going to get somebody to fix this." The fear in their voices was palpable, a harbinger of the tragedy that had just unfolded. Panic echoed in the frantic voices on the other end of the line. "I can't understand." "Okay, this is somebody pick a plan, somebody pick a plan." "Hold on, stay on the line with me, okay? We're going to get somebody to fix this." In that moment of chaos, Jocelyn, Yanna's older sister, found herself unable to recall their home address. Time seemed to freeze as panic enveloped the family. Their mother, Patricia, struggled to articulate her thoughts, her words tumbling out in Spanish, barely coherent. Yet, even without understanding the language, the weight of her sorrow was palpable. A life had been lost, and the urgency of the moment demanded the swift intervention of the police. The chilling echoes of the 911 tapes replayed in my mind, reminding me of the many homicide cases I had worked on. As a prosecutor, I had encountered countless cases of grief. Yet, the anguished wail of a mother resonated universally, transcending language. Its haunting tone lingered in my mind, a reminder of the pain that only a parent could know. In a frantic rush, officers arrived at the scene. Upon entering the house, the reality of the situation struck them like a physical blow. They understood immediately why Patricia and Jocelyn were in such distress. There, in her own bed, lay Johanna, bound and partially clothed. The horrifying evidence suggested that she had been sexually assaulted before her life was cruelly taken. All of this transpired within mere hours, while her family was away, blissfully unaware of the tragedy unfolding. Adding to the tragedy was what police discovered on Johanna's lifeless body. The sight felt unbearably wrong. Johanna had always taken pride in her martial arts prowess, dedicating herself to mastering karate. The very martial arts belt that once represented Johanna's achievements had now become a sinister tool. It was cruelly wrapped around her neck, tied tightly in a double knot. What had once filled her with pride now served a horrifying purpose, leaving marks of the struggle etched into her skin. The pressure was so intense that the blood vessels in her eyes and face burst. The meticulous nature of the crime indicated that the perpetrator had taken their time, deliberately orchestrating a scene that was anything but impulsive. Investigators discovered her earbuds still nestled in her ears, suggesting she had been listening to something before the horror struck. In a terrifying twist, her attacker approached without her knowledge, catching her completely off guard. It appeared the assailant intended to assault her, as the disarray of her clothing suggested a struggle. Yet, at the last moment, something changed in the assailant's mind. Johanna's death was not just a personal loss. It sent shockwaves through the entire community, igniting a collective sadness and anger that was almost palpable. Her family was left utterly shattered, grappling with the aftermath of a senseless tragedy. Following the initial investigation, the police took the familiar route of canvassing the neighborhood, seeking answers from those who might hold the key to uncovering the truth. Investigators were now tasked with uncovering any detail that could provide a clue. They sought to determine if anyone in the neighborhood had witnessed anything unusual. Johanna was merely 12 years old, far too young to have made enemies or to have been the target of malice. She had no romantic ties, and the absence of motive left the detectives searching for any nearby individuals with criminal backgrounds. Just 2 doors down from Johanna's home was a neighbor named Roy Coons Jr. His criminal history, marked by a record dating back 30 years, raised immediate red flags for the police. However, during their first conversation, nothing about Roy seemed out of the ordinary. As they canvassed the area, the detectives approached Roy. On the surface, he appeared to be just another ordinary resident. His demeanor didn't raise immediate suspicion, but his criminal history loomed large in the minds of the investigators, compelling them to delve deeper. Roy had been arrested a staggering 102 times, with his first encounter with the law at the tender age of 19. His record included a 1,999 conviction for his third DUI and a 2001 conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The pattern of his offenses escalated over the years, culminating in 2 counts of aggravated assault in 2011 and a conviction for aggravated murder in 2010. Time and again, he violated parole, each release only fueling his criminal behavior further. When Johanna's murder occurred, it was impossible to ignore the implications of Roy's past. Though the specifics remained unclear, one fact was undeniable: the weight of suspicion bore down heavily on him. After the tragedy, the police maintained vigilant surveillance of Roy. He was a man marked by his history, and the investigation demanded that every angle be explored. In the wake of this brutal crime, the authorities kept a watchful eye on him, determined to uncover the truth behind Johanna's tragic demise. Just 2 doors down from Yanna Ortega, Roy Coons Jr. found himself at the center of suspicion. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they felt compelled to ensure he wasn't involved. His behavior was odd. He lingered outside, seemingly trying to piece together the unfolding drama. One would expect someone in Roy's predicament to shy away from the spotlight. Yet, he seemed magnetically drawn to it. Each time the officers arrived, he watched them closely, his interest bordering on obsession. The situation escalated when police returned to his residence for further questioning. Typically, individuals would be eager to assist in a case of such magnitude, but Roy was an anomaly. His reluctance to share information raised questions. Was it his troubled past or something far more sinister? With every inquiry, Roy grew increasingly agitated. One sharp-eyed officer noted his furtive glances toward Johanna's house, a behavior that only deepened the suspicion surrounding him. After observing him for several days, a determined female officer resolved it was time for another confrontation. This officer had been one of the first responders on the scene, and something about Roy unsettled her. Approaching him with a sense of urgency, she found him unwilling to engage, his irritation palpable. Roy's gaze frequently drifted towards Johanna's home. In the aftermath of such a crime, onlookers inevitably gathered, drawn by the commotion. But Roy's fixation raised eyebrows. There was an undeniable quality about Roy that caught the officer's attention. She had arrived at the scene shortly after the tragedy, and despite the days that had passed, she felt a nagging need to revisit him for clarification. Roy feigned ignorance about the horrific events that transpired just a stone's throw from his own front door. Yet, his visible frustration with the police's inquiries only fueled their suspicions. They were unyielding, their duty demanded thoroughness, and Roy was not making their task any easier. His erratic behavior sent alarm bells ringing, prompting investigators to hone in on him. Instead of clearing his name, Roy's hostility only deepened their mistrust. They probed further, questioning whether his agitation stemmed from the trauma of the neighborhood's tragedy. Was there more at play? The officers explained that gathering information was essential for their investigation, yet Roy remained obstinate. His defensive demeanor only intensified their scrutiny. "Are you upset because of the horror that occurred in your neighborhood?" They pressed. It was a reasonable inquiry, but it was crucial for Roy to understand that law enforcement needed to conduct their investigation without hindrance. The officers urged him to offer basic information to help eliminate him as a suspect. At 45 years old, living with his parents and lacking a steady job, Roy's lifestyle painted a troubling picture. He spent most of his days indoors, a fact that did not escape the police. As they pieced together the puzzle of who Roy really was, the revelations were far from reassuring. It became clear that they needed to gather tangible evidence, and a cigarette discarded on his front lawn presented an opportunity. This seemingly trivial item might hold the key to unraveling the mystery surrounding Johanna's death. The discarded cigarette was more than refuse. It was a potential link to the crime itself. When someone discards an item, they inadvertently leave behind a trace of themselves. A cigarette, touched by the hands and lips of its smoker, contains vital DNA evidence. After Roy carelessly tossed it onto his lawn, the police quickly retrieved it, fully aware that even the smallest clue could yield significant insights. With urgency, the police acted, knowing that this fragment of evidence could bridge the gap between suspicion and certainty. In the world of crime investigation, something as innocuous as a cigarette could become a critical turning point in the case. In a disturbing twist, Roy left behind a cigarette, a small yet significant piece of evidence. While it may seem repugnant for investigators, it represented crucial intelligence. The cigarette was sent to the lab, where technicians began the painstaking task of developing a DNA profile, which would soon be compared to other samples in their possession. The questions intensified. Have you been inside since Patricia? As police probed the complexities of Roy's life, they began to question him more directly, seeking clarity in the chaos surrounding Johanna's tragic fate. Investigators were eager to determine if Roy held any insights into the motive behind the brutal murder of a young girl like Johanna. When quizzed, Roy's responses were tentative, almost as if he were merely speculating. He suggested it could have been a robbery gone awry. In a seemingly casual suggestion, Roy posited the possibility that an intruder had broken in, unaware that Johanna was at home, leading to a tragic escalation. But was he merely tossing out random theories to the detectives, or did he possess knowledge that hinted at deeper involvement? Following this, the police pressed him for further details about his whereabouts on that fateful day. On the day of the murder, Roy claimed he had only stepped out to buy cigarettes and to walk a friend's dog. He also acknowledged his routine of mowing Patricia's lawn. Yet, the investigators remained skeptical of his narrative. Initially, they had no reason to trust his account. They sought to question him further, noting that he spent more time at home than anyone else in the neighborhood. Roy was known to keep to himself, which only fueled their suspicions. Roy insisted he had a number to call that changed frequently. He promised if he noticed anything unusual, he would report it. However, when the lab results came back, they sent shockwaves through the investigation. Roy's DNA was discovered in several unexpected locations within the crime scene. His DNA was discovered on a windowsill in the Ortega home, as well as on some of Johanna's clothing, including a shirt and a sock. However, the most alarming finding was a YSTR match linking Roy's DNA to Johanna's cheek, arm, and lower body. Strikingly, his DNA was absent from the martial arts belt used to strangle Johanna, and none of the fingerprints found at the scene matched his. These conflicting signals left investigators bewildered. Was Roy Coons Jr. directly involved, or had he simply been present at the house on a prior occasion, unbeknownst to anyone? Even more unsettling, a day after Johanna's tragic death, a police officer observed Roy strolling down the street. What caught the officer's attention was the sight of latex gloves protruding from Roy's pocket. The challenge of uncovering latent prints often complicated investigations. It's crucial to understand that fingerprints can be easily obliterated. They aren't always present. This revelation generated intrigue among investigators, particularly since it occurred the day after the homicide. As Roy walked casually down the road, the police officer's discovery of the latex gloves was not merely a coincidence. The presence of DNA without accompanying fingerprints raised red flags that demanded further scrutiny. Yet, Roy continued to speak freely when the police pressed him for answers. When asked if he had noticed anything peculiar in the neighborhood, Roy mentioned a truck. He rambled on about observing armed vehicles involved in a confrontation and referenced a distinctive custom truck that had caught his eye in the days leading up to Johanna's murder. Following this exchange, the officers could no longer dismiss Roy's erratic behavior. His narrative about other individuals being involved raised suspicions, yet they felt compelled to explore every avenue. It was not only Roy's DNA they had recovered from the crime scene. The investigation revealed traces of other men's DNA in the room and on Johanna's body, further complicating the case. The police faced the daunting task of determining Roy's role in the larger narrative and whether he was part of a more intricate web of involvement. In a shocking twist, traces of other men's DNA were discovered both in the room and on Yanna Ortega's body. This revelation complicated the investigation, leaving law enforcement scrambling to piece together how Roy Coons Jr. fit into the larger puzzle, and whether others shared complicity in this heinous crime. By this point in the investigation, Roy Coons Jr. had become the prime suspect. The police went public, revealing to the media that they possessed DNA evidence linking him directly to the murder, a critical piece of scientific evidence that could prove pivotal in court. The analysis conducted by both the Metro Police Department and the TBI crime laboratories proved crucial to the unfolding investigation. As they meticulously gathered information from Yanna Ortega's family and neighbors, one glaring fact emerged: Roy Coons Jr. and Johanna had never even met. His visits to the house had been infrequent, limited to mowing the lawn on a handful of occasions. He had exchanged a brief handshake with Patricia Velasquez, Johanna's mother. So, why was his DNA discovered within the confines of the Ortega home? In a classic move of investigative strategy, detectives allowed Roy to fill the silence, hoping he might inadvertently reveal more than intended. In a startling revelation, Roy Coons Jr. provided details about the crime that only the detectives and Yanna Ortega's family could have known. The police had withheld specifics regarding the strangulation and the attempted sexual assault. So how did Roy possess this intimate knowledge? He claimed to have heard it from someone outside. However, the detectives found his explanation unconvincing. Roy loitered around the scene, displaying an unsettling familiarity with information that was not publicly available. Despite their suspicions, it remained insufficient evidence for an immediate arrest. Retired Detective Melissa Pinkleton observed that in close-knit communities, such as trailer parks, residents often overhear information even when police attempt to keep details under wraps. Perhaps Roy had acquired snippets of information through gossip, akin to a game of telephone. Yet, the police remained skeptical that this was the extent of it. He had accurately stated that Johanna had been strangled, a detail not disclosed to the public at that time. The chilling truth was that the defendant knew it well. At 4:19 p.m., Johanna identified the man who had knocked on her trailer door that fateful day. It was the man responsible for cutting their lawn. All the evidence pointed to Roy Coons Jr. being the very man who maintained their yard. Then, weeks after Johanna's murder, investigators turned their attention to her phone records. In a haunting twist, Johanna had unwittingly aided in unraveling her own case. The detectives unearthed a chilling message she had sent to her mother at 4:15 p.m. on August 10th, the day her life was brutally cut short. "Mom, someone is knocking on the door," she wrote. Just moments later, at 4:19, Johanna sent another text. "I think it's the man who cuts the yard." That man was, unmistakably Roy Coons Jr. This text emerged as the critical piece of evidence linking him directly to the crime scene. The timing of the message positioned Roy at Johanna's home, in contact with her, precisely as the horrific events unfolded. It was the missing puzzle piece detectives needed to complete the grim picture. Thus, after all the revelations, a terrifying narrative began to take shape. Roy was not merely the neighbor who mowed their lawn. He had been lurking, observing, and waiting for the opportune moment. He knew their routines and had likely stalked them for an extended period. Before executing his sinister plan, authorities apprehended Roy Coons Jr. in September 2022, charging him with the murder of Yanna Ortega. Following his arrest, the Tennessee police were left grappling with a grim reality. Roy was not an ordinary criminal. His criminal history was staggering, with over 100 arrests to his name. How had someone with such a lengthy record of parole violations remained free? This was not merely a systemic failure, but a catastrophic failure that had cost an innocent life. The officers involved in the case wrestled with the disheartening truth that individuals like Roy continued to walk the streets despite their numerous violent offenses. They were haunted by the fact that many of those arrested for violent crimes had extensive prior convictions, yet remained at large. But now, Roy was finally off the streets, incarcerated without the possibility of bail. While there was a collective sigh of relief knowing he could no longer pose a threat, this relief was not shared by all. His family still stood by him. Yet, with Roy in custody, the trial loomed ahead, fraught with challenges. There were no eyewitnesses to confirm Roy's presence at Johanna's home that day, and the physical evidence was scant, save for the DNA discovered inside the house. However, this DNA was enough to raise eyebrows. A YSTR profile, a specific type of DNA analysis, matched Roy's and was found on Johanna's cheek and buttocks. But that evidence alone could not guarantee a straightforward conviction. There would be no eyewitnesses to testify that Mr. Coons had entered that mobile home on that fateful day. There would be no video footage from security cameras to corroborate his actions. Moreover, there were no witnesses to establish any motive or past attempts at harm against this family. In many murder cases, circumstantial evidence alone would not suffice to secure a conviction. Roy's defense team was acutely aware of this and mounted a vigorous defense. They emphasized the absence of witnesses and the lack of security camera footage to support the charges against him. Moreover, they argued there was no indication that Roy had any motive to harm Johanna or her family. Yet, the text messages Johanna sent to her mother at 4:19 p.m. identifying Roy as the one knocking on the door painted a different narrative. In one of the most incriminating pieces of evidence, Johanna had sent a text to her mother stating, "Mom, someone is knocking on the door." Moments later, at 4:19 p.m., she responded to Patricia Velasquez, saying, "I think it was the man who cuts the yard." This message painted a damning picture of Roy's involvement. This revelation placed him squarely at the crime scene, right where the murder unfolded. When Johanna communicated with the police, they didn't require security footage or witness testimony. Her text message became a vital piece of the evidence puzzle. It established his presence, connecting him to Johanna at the critical moment before her life was brutally cut short. But Roy's actions didn't end there. After committing the murder, he fled to a nearby homeless shelter, further complicating the investigation. Despite believing he was safe, hidden from both the police and the community, Roy's facade began to crack. While at a homeless shelter, he approached a man named Moses and posed a chilling question, "Have you ever killed somebody?" Moses, taken aback, didn't pry for details. Yet, Roy felt compelled to divulge. He confessed to having committed murder, though he shrouded the specifics. He would not reveal the identity of his victim or the timeline of the crime. Instead, he simply asked if Moses had ever taken a life. Without being prompted, Roy revealed his dark secret. He didn't clarify who the victim was or when the crime took place, but his admission lingered in Moses's mind, a chilling testament to the horrors he had committed. Moses felt a wave of fear wash over him. He had never experienced anything like it before. Unaware of the ongoing investigation, he was so disturbed by their conversation that he ultimately decided to step forward and testify as a witness. The weight of Roy's chilling confession was the final blow. Moses's testimony provided the jury with the clarity they needed to reach a verdict. On July 15, 2024, they found Roy Coons Jr. guilty on 2 counts second-degree murder and felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Ronald Donald Coons Jr., in count 1 guilty of second-degree murder and in count 2 guilty of felony murder, came the declaration. In a haunting moment, I walked over and placed a candle in his hand, a silent tribute to the life lost. In a poignant moment, he dropped his head and walked away, leaving behind a palpable sense of guilt. With a life sentence, plus an additional 25 years, the perpetrator was finally held accountable. The case had reached its conclusion, and justice for Yanna Ortega had been served. While he claimed innocence, he expressed sorrow for the family's loss, but the weight of his actions hung heavy in the air.